ultimately his getting well, I think, started in some ways in the airing of that. The longer you can keep that in the shadows, the one thing any addict wants to do is keep it concealed and hidden, and that's why they become such good liars.
I want to talk to you very briefly about Barry Blaustein, who was in attendance with his camera crew at the show filming the documentary Beyond the Mat, including shooting one of Paul's legendary rah-rah speeches in the back where he's halfway up the, the rickety wooden steps. Did you spend any time with Barry, and what did you think of the concept of Beyond the Mat, and did you want to be in it or not be in it?
I did speak to Barry quite often. He, by the way, he would be at the arena more often than just that night. Again, for me, like when the action figures came out, the same thing with Barry doing his documentary. All of these were going to be ways of getting the message out. If you've got some kid in Walmart buying a franchise figure, if you've got some kid someplace watching Beyond the Mat, these are ways of getting the word out about ECW. And so any press is good press, right? I don't know who said that, but I'm sure it was somebody pretty well known.
So yeah, it was probably someone who owned a newspaper who said that.
Yeah,
any
probably
news
so.
Any news is good news.
Right. But Barry was going around and talking to pretty much everybody. As I recall, he was there filming more than just once. And, excuse me, the speech that Paul gave that night was not, it wasn't scripted. It wasn't something he just did because the cameras were there. That was something that Paul did quite often. And he, in my experience, was the best ever at seeing it. Like he could instill in you the idea that you can go out and do this. Yeah, the odds are against us, but we can be the little train that does it, that chugs along. And I hear these phrases today. We all drank Paul's Kool-Aid or whatever. The real fact of the matter is that we had all bought into the product. We had all bought into each other. We had bought into the concept, and we had fully put our bodies on the line to deliver that product and the goods to the fans. And it wasn't hard because the fans were rabid. But with Barry being there, like there was a part of me that you understand, like where I came into the business, into that old school where kayfabe was like ultra protective. And, Chris Angel doesn't come on like at the beginning of a show and say, okay, you're going to see me cut a lady in half today, and here's what I'm really doing. Because then it sort of detracts from the specialness of what that trick is. The same thing with wrestling. I think that once you expose so much of it, that it sort of becomes a little bit ho-hum. And, and you can see like online today, especially where fans are, typing in their 2 cents worth.
Well, it sort of stops. It stops you sort of like watching what's on screen. You're almost like analyzing it. You become an analyst without even realizing it.
Yeah, and allow yourself to be sucked into it.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, it's I'm a huge fan for movies. I love going to the movie theater, and if the movie's the right movie, and allowing myself to let my brain just wander off and go to wherever that's going to take me. The same thing with wrestling matches. A kid watching that, the relevance of whether or not it was real or not real was irrelevant to me. The relevance was in the storytelling and the larger than life characters that were being portrayed on camera. And I think today that the business has gone to the place where we've argued, talked about this ad nauseum of, where it doesn't any longer make sense. And it's just, thrown out there and just accept it as we give it to you. And I think it does a real detriment to what the power of storytelling can be. And, I'll watch a 65-year-old Ricky Morton go out and still mesmerize an audience. And I asked the kids when we're sitting and watching him doing that, I said, like, why would you throw a backflip or 30 kicks into the head or whatever at this point? Look at the audience. The audience is already on their feet. They're enjoying it. They're having a rapport. There's nothing you could do that's going to take that audience any higher at that point. Allow them the point to be entertained. So like you said, there's a whole ton of stuff that went into that pay-per-view, and like the questions that you wanted to ask. There was the soap opera that was ECW, right? This is like sort of the unspoken story that's being told there, in spite of all that soap opera-ish stuff that was going on in the back, or in scenes that we didn't see played out in front of us. Being on the telephone with conference calls with pay-per-view companies, and turning some of them down at times because they wanted to deliver a certain way that we didn't want to deliver, or that Paul didn't want to deliver. But ultimately getting that night up and off the ground and actually beaming something out from the ECW arena to where fans around the world could now suddenly, at their per usual, pay their money and get their own personal window into the ECW arena. I think was a special moment in wrestling, and it certainly was a monumental step for ECW.
Did you actually watch the finished article, the documentary?
Yes.
If you're going to give it 2 thumbs up or whatever, I mean, ultimately, did it leave you feel warm about the business? Did it leave you cold? I mean, I know, like there was some sorry characters in there, like Jake the Snake Roberts, really comes off bad. And I know you have to show the good bits, the bad bits, the glitz and the glamour, and the highs and the lows. At this point, Jake in early '97 I found this out as well. It was just funny. It wasn't funny, I'm sure, at the time. Jake had been fired from the WWF around like February of '97 because he was a wrestler at the time. I think he was also on the booking committee for renting a car and then promptly just disappearing for 2 days, and he missed a shot. And then that wasn't the first time it happened either. He'd been fired before and then brought right back, but this time he was sort of done. More I'm asking is Jake the Snake probably at his lowest at that point, and having it documented and put on the silver screen and left there for all time for all to see, basically. I mean, what did you think of that when you were seeing it at the time?
Well, we're straddling the fence because I see this going on in the dressing room in front of my eyes. And, having known what a great talent he was and can be, and then seeing that play out, nobody wants their dirty laundry aired, right? I mean, that's, stuff you want to keep. But to me, ultimately, it shows the fans that we are human, that we're not 10 feet tall, and that, yes, we feel pain, and that there are the same struggles that go on in that dressing room that every person out there today listening and watching this program go through and endure in their families. And in that respect, I think there's something therapeutic about it. For where wrestling was just previous to this experiment called ECW, and then going through it, I still had come from that what I consider old school, and I broke into the business and watching those guys just to the last drop of their body, protecting the kayfabe of what the industry was. And then suddenly having this door flung open and everybody looking in and seeing stuff. I think ultimately the industry has come to learn to deal with that in some respects. But I think like using Jake as the template, ultimately his getting well, I think started in some ways in the airing of that. The longer you can keep that in the shadows, the one thing any addict wants to do is keep it concealed and hidden. And that's why they become such good liars and concealers and lock themselves away. And suddenly you don't see your friend anymore that you used to see every day. Those are the things that addicts want to do because they're ashamed of what's happened. And they don't really know how to, especially in our business with these larger than life super egos that we wrestlers have. The last thing you want to show somebody is, hey, I'm human. I have an Achilles heel, and I feel pain, because that detracts somewhat from inside that business. In a larger sense, today, having the luxury of 30 years looking back at that, I think now we can look at it and say, yeah, there's been good and there's been bad from it. But more so than not, when I hear the stories of the younger kids today that they had hopefully by and large learned of my generation's genocide, how many of the guys that are in graves that still today shouldn't be in graves and been there for 25, 30 years. I think that is the epitaph to it. So like, if some good can come from that, then by all means, fling the doors open. That said, I think that now by opening that door, you've given those people that want to sit down and give their 2 cents worth on the business, and will actually get into arguments with guys about the business. I believe everybody's entitled to their opinion, but I think that ultimately, like again, LeBron James trumps Shane Douglas when it comes to the NBA. Shane Douglas, after 40 years, is going to trump somebody else out there. Doesn't mean that it delegitimizes their point of view. But if that person out there says A and the 40-year veteran says B, the fan watching most likely should fall down on the side of the B, because that person's been there and seen it. So again, like with everything, I think there's the good and the bad of it, but in flinging those doors open, I remember watching Beyond the Mat the first time and thinking to myself, like, ooh, It's showing stuff because that stuff had typically not been shown previously. And in some ways, I think it's damaged the business. But ultimately, I think that what we see, what would be my take on what's wrong with the business today, isn't because of documentaries like Beyond the Mat. It's more so because the business has somehow transcended and moved beyond what wrestling's supposed to have been. And everybody always thinks there's a better way to create the wheel. When you boil it down, it's just the circle, and so there's only so many ways to draw that or build that. As we get further and further away from those basal points that were professional wrestling and storytelling, I think it detracts a bit more and more from each step along the way. They move away from that. The storytelling becomes less pronounced. The moves become less impactful because it's just a vomiting up of moves as opposed to putting that move in the right place. There was a spot last night where, and I know we're going to get into the barely legal later, but during the Taz and Sabu match, where he hits Taz hits Sabu with one of his suplexes out of no place, and Sabu takes the bump and he stands up and he's like sort of drunk walking away a few steps before he slumps over to the corner. That looked so believable to me, so real, that again, for as a 40-year veteran watching it, I'm thinking to myself, I catching myself going, okay, I know Sabu's just selling because if he was really hurt, he'd be down and not moving. But my God, it was just like, wow. That's what can be done with the power of storytelling done properly, as opposed to, well, everybody knows it's a work, so it just doesn't matter.